Hello. So today we're going to have a look at GPS navigation. This video is going to be a bit less structured than normal because most of it involves me demonstrating the GPS unit and how it works. So GPS stands for Global Positioning System. This is a navigation system which receives signals from multiple satellites in orbit around Earth. These determine your position anywhere on the planet. A couple of advantages of GPS is that it can be used in any weather conditions, and it is also very accurate. It can calculate your position to within 3 meters. I'm not going to explain how it all works because it's kind of complicated, but what I am interested in is how we can use it when flying. Okay, so here we are up in the plane. Just before I start, I just want to say that I'm going to be just recording this live and try and do all of this in one go. So if I stutter and stammer, I do apologise, but I'm just trying to kind of do all of this live and try and think about everything sort of on the spot. So hopefully it goes okay. Anyway, the GPS. So there's two ways of accessing the GPS in the plane here. The first one is by clicking this little button down here, which looks like a little satellite dish symbol. Or alternatively, you can hit Shift plus the number 3 on the keyboard and it'll open up the GPS window there, like so. So, there's a lot going on here. There's a lot of information that's kind of missing from the screen as well, but let me explain what's happening here. So this is the default screen that you get on the GPS. You can see it's got the aircraft here, and it shows you the kind of lay of the land around about there. You can see the water is in blue here, and the land is all black. What it's telling us at the top is the track here, so this is our current heading. So at the moment we're flying 151 degrees, and you can see we've got a bit of a sort of a compass heading indicator going on here as well. We also have the zoom, which shows us the current sort of zoom level of the map, and also down here in the bottom corner we can see our ground speed. Now at the bottom here you can also see we've got a couple of icons which represent Inverness Airport and various navigation aids such as the NDB, VOR, and also our sort of glide slope and localizer there in green. So I'll start off with the nice and simple buttons and then move on to more complicated things as we go on with this. So to obviously to change the zoom on the map, we've got two buttons here which says range. So you tap the up arrow to zoom out and the lower arrow to zoom in. Now the next, I'm going to skip out these buttons for now. The next kind of control I want to talk about is this dial here. So there's actually three functions that this dial has. It's got a larger outer kind of rotating dial. It's got a smaller internal dial here, and you can also push this internal dial as well. And you'll use that to select various things in various menus later on. So on this sort of default screen, there is a second screen or a second view that you can have set. If you have a look at the blue bar here, you can see that we're on our kind of navigation screen at the moment, and you can see that there's two white kind of boxes here. That means this is basically two sort of pages within this kind of menu, you could think of it as. So to select the second one, you go to the smaller dial and tap it to the right. And you can see that our view changes. We lose all of the information around the screen there, and you can see that we have a sort of a view of our aircraft pointing north. And if we were to turn the aircraft, you would see that the little aircraft icon would also turn. And similar to the view before, we can zoom this one out and back in as we need to. So, the next, what I'm going to do is I'll talk about these buttons down here along the bottom. So the first one, NRST, stands for nearest. So what this will do is this will display various navigation aids which are nearest to our aircraft at the moment. So if we tap the button there, the first page that we get is nearest airports. And you can see that gives us a lot of information about each airport. So it gives us the 4-letter code for the airport, so Echo Golf Papa Echo is Inverness. We can see that it gives us the bearing to the airport. So that's the bearing relative to the plane. So if we were to turn to a heading of 327 degrees, we would be pointing directly back towards the airport. It gives us the tower frequency, which is 122.6. Also shows us the distance to the airport. Here it also shows that it has an ILS approach system available as well, and it also gives us details about the runway, or the runway length more specifically. So the main runway at Inverness Airport is 6,670 feet. Now, obviously you can probably see here that we've got a little list of different airports here. And you can see that we've got what looks like a scroll bar here on the side. So if you want to have a look at what's further down the list, this is what you would do. If you tap the button on the dial here, push it in once, you can see that we get like a little green cursor shows up and it starts to flash. So if we wanted to have a look down the list now, you would rotate the outer dial, almost got that wrong, and you can rotate the outer dial and you can see that you can scroll down the list and have a look at other airports around the area. One other thing I didn't quite cover is this little icon here. So if the pink icon is solid, that means that the airport has like a hard runway, like a concrete or an asphalt runway. If it's a hollow circle, that means that it's a soft runway, so that could be like a dirt runway or a grass runway. Just one thing to remember there. And if you want to get rid of this cursor so that you don't scroll, you just push the button in again, and the words push cursor there kind of give it away. Now you can see that we have 5 pages here in this sort of the nearest menu. So we have 5 different options at looking at what's near the plane. So the first page is obviously airports. If you rotate the smaller dial, the next page you can see is our nearest intersections. So I haven't really talked about this in any of my previous videos, but in aviation there's kind of what are called airways, which are basically roads in the sky, and those airways are broken up by intersections, which allow you to change from one airway to another, or to transition from an airway to an approach to an airport, or a departure from an airport and transition to an airway. And as far as I'm aware, airways are mostly defined by 5 characters. So you can see we've got D200O, and we've got Vadno and Davot, and you can see that all of these various intersections here. It also gives us details about the bearing to the intersection from the plane. So at the moment we can tell that D200O is at a bearing of 060 degrees, and it's at a distance there of 6 nautical miles. So that's the next kind of nearest items that we have close to us. Hit the smaller dial again. The third page is our nearest NDBs. So you can see that we've got the Inverness NDB and its identifier there, IVR. You can see we've got the little NDB icon. And again, similar to the last page, we've got the bearing, we've got the distance, and it also shows us the ADF radio frequency for the NDB there. The fourth page shows us various VORs, again from the nearest one and then increasing in distance. So we've got the Inverness VOR, the icon there, bearing, distance and the frequency. So you can see the icons here look a little different depending on which icon it is. So the top one here from Inverness, that's our VOR DME, so that's a VOR station which also supports distance measuring equipment. Down here, PTH, which I think is Perth, is just your sort of standard VOR, so that's a VOR station but it does not have DME capability. And this square one, now don't quote me on this one, this is just an educated guess, but I think what these represent are something called VORTAX, which I think is short for Tactical VOR. These are VOR stations which are used by the military, and they can also be used by civilian aircraft. Again, that's just an educated guess, so don't quote me on that one. Anyway, moving on to the 5th page, it gives us details about various sections of airspace that we're close to. And most of these are usually just self-explanatory, so you can see we've got a glider area nearby. We've got air-to-air refueling, because just down the sort of the coast from Inverness we've actually got 2 RAF stations. We have the fantastic RAF Kinloss and RAF Lossiemouth. So you can imagine that there's a lot of sort of military activity in the skies, sort of above the Highlands and above the kind of the north and northeast of Scotland. So we have air-to-air refueling in a specific area of sky in kind of the north of Scotland there. And also we've got UK Orbit Area 9. I've got no idea what that means, to be honest. But there you go. So those are the sort of the nearest pages, or the pages which represent the nearest items to the plane at present. And if we want to get rid of that and come back to the navigation, there's two options that we have. We can either hit the nearest button again to get rid of it, or if you press and hold the clear button here, you hold it down for about 1, maybe 2 seconds, then it'll just close any menu or any page that you have open and take you back to the kind of the main navigation screen. Like that. So, OBS, that actually relates to when you have a flight plan sort of enabled and kind of loaded into the GPS. I'll talk about that a bit later on. But basically, when you have a flight plan enabled, you'll have like different legs, like different sections of your flights. What the OBS button there does is actually, let me hear, if I look at the definition of it, the OBS button allows the GPS to automatically sequence the next waypoint. So it allows the GPS to automatically jump to the next waypoint as you reach each point of your flight plan. If you hit the OBS button, you do have an option there to, I think, prevent that from happening. So that's just something to be aware of there. The MSG button down here is the message button. So as you're flying along, you'll probably receive various messages depending on where you're flying and if you're flying close to various bits of airspace or not. When you receive a message, you'll get like a little flashing notification here, and then you can hit the message button and receive like a more detailed message in this screen here. If you want to prevent messages from coming up, you can press and hold the message button. Yeah, there you go. So you can press and hold the message button there, and it can kind of turn the notifications off there, so you don't constantly get bothered by messages there. FPL is details of your current flight plan. At the moment I don't have one because I'm just kind of far at the moment. I'm not really doing anything fancy, but I will come to that later on in the video. TER stands for terrain, and when you enable that, all it does is basically colour in the map and give you a much kind of better idea of elevation changes in the land. So you can see up here we've got what appear to be mountains, and if you close the GPS, you can see that we have some mountains just over here that we're getting a bit close to. So now would be a good time to turn away from that and fly back north. And what I'll do is also, so you can see this page in action here, you can see on the sort of the second navigation there, the aircraft icon changes direction as you turn. What we'll do is we'll turn and head back north. So that's terrain there. And then the last button here is proc, or which is short for procedure. So when you have a flight plan, you'll mainly be using this with approaches to an airport. And you can see that we have various kind of options there. And again, I'll cover those later on in the video when it's flight plan and sort of navigating with the GPS. So yeah, I'll have a quick look at these buttons here as well. So we'll start from the bottom and work our way up. So the enter button, it works very similar to the enter key on your keyboard. It's used for sort of confirming choices that you make within the GPS, and you'll see that later on. Clear, as I've shown you before, allows you to kind of jump back to this default menu, or this default screen rather. What you can also do is if you tap the clear button, it will also remove some of the detail that you can see on the kind of the main navigation page here. So if you keep an eye on Inverness Airport up here, as I hit the clear button, you'll see that some of the navigation aids and things disappear. So it just cleans up your view and takes away a few items there. and you can tell sort of what level of clearance you've got on your display there, because it will show a little number next to the zoom. So you can see here it says zoom is 20 nautical miles minus 1, so it's got one level of kind of clearance on it at the moment. Hit the clearance button again there, you see it's number 2, number 3, and then it's back to default there. Okay, so unfortunately I had to cut the video there. I made a slight mistake just after the last part, but it happens, right? Anyway, so there's a couple more features that you can, or there's a couple more menus that you can access from this default navigation page. I talked earlier about using the smaller dial to change the view. You can also use the larger dial to access a couple of different options there. So if we go to the right one on the larger dial, you can see that it gives us information about the airport. And if I go to the right again, you can see that it brings up our nearest pages. So I'll go back to the airport information here. So you can see that it gives us information about Inverness. It says that it gives us our identifier. It says that it's a public airport, city and region and all the rest of it. It also gives us a few more details about the airport, such as its location, elevation, the types of fuel which are available, any approach systems which are available, so in this case ILS, and also if it uses any specific radar or airspace designations there. If we have a look down here, you can see that we've got several more pages relating to sort of Inverness Airport. So we'll have a look through them. On the second page, we have a little sort of map of the airport there, which gives you details of various runways. I'm not sure why, but Inverness Airport has like a couple of extra runways. I don't know why. I don't know. But you can see that it gives us details about the most important and main runway. So the main runway is 0523, the length and width of the airport in feet, the type of surface, and also says that the runway is in use full time. On the third page we get a few radio frequencies which are used by the airport. So we've got 2 approach frequencies, 1 tower frequency, and also one ILS, one ILS sort of frequency for both ends of the main runway. On the next page we get a way to look at the various approaches which are used by Inverness Airport. I'll cover that in a few minutes when I look at how to fly an approach to the airport, but you'll see another page in a few minutes time which looks exactly like this. On the next screen here you can see that we have information about waypoints. So there's D200O again, and gives us details about the nearest VOR. The next page we have the nearest NDB, and on the final page we have the nearest VOR, and with various details about that as well. Now you can change which airports and which navigation aid that you can see. If you remember, the third page here is the nearest page. So if we want to have a look at, say, Echo Golf Quebec Kilo, which is RAF Kinloss, what we do is if we push the cursor in, scroll down to that, so that airport is highlighted, and then hit enter, you can see it automatically jumps back to this page, and it now gives us details about Kinloss. And then we can scroll through the pages again. You can see Kinloss has one runway there, and all the details are different. And we can access different approaches there. So that's pretty cool. That's a pretty cool function there. So what I'll do is I'll switch that back to Inverness. Enter, and then we've got Inverness there. Excellent. One other thing that I've just noticed there is you can see now that here's the message flashing. So we have a look there, and it just tells us that we've got airspace ahead. So that's basically the message button in action. That pretty much covers all of the functions that you can do when flying sort of VFR when you're not flying with a flight plan. So let's look at how we would fly if we do have a flight plan, or if we want to create a flight plan. Now, unfortunately, with the GPS you can't create like a long flight plan during the flight, but what you can do is you can fly direct to a waypoint. So that could be flying directly to an airport, directly to an NDB or a VOR, or even an intersection. So let's say that we want to fly directly back towards Inverness. So we go up to this button here and tap it once, and you can see that we have the cursor up here. So what we can do up here is we can type in the identifier code for the waypoint that we want, or if we hit the larger ring, we can jump down here, and I think we can type in the name of the either the city or the location. So we could type in Inverness or Kinloss in that point. It's easy to do the. I wonder actually. So I'm just wondering as well if we can. Alright, you can also jump the cursor down here to the nearest waypoint. So we do want to fly to EGP, but I'll bring it back up there. So what you can do up here is you can type in the identifier code for the waypoint that you want, and you can type it in by using the smaller dial. So you just rotate that, and then you can start to type that in, and then you can use the larger dial to jump back and forth between each character. Now, rather than clicking in all the time down here to type it in, obviously you can jump to the nearest if that's where you want to go, or you can use your keyboard to type in the code. So I want to fly to Inverness, so we go Golf Papa Echo, and then you can see it gives us Inverness, and the icon there shows us that it's an airport. So that's what we want. So we need to hit enter there, hit it again, and you can see now that the cursor jumps down to activate. So is that the sort of the flight path that we want to activate? Yes, it is. So we'll hit enter one more time, and you can see now that it draws us a nice pink line directly from our current position to the airport. And you can also have a look here and see that we've got some more information being displayed around the screen. Now, we activated that, but the plane isn't flying that. We're still flying away from it. I'll show you what we need to do to get the plane to automatically follow that path. So if you have a look on top of the radio stack here, we've got this small button here which says Nav GPS. What this does is this controls the what kind of input the autopilot is using. So at the moment it's set to use the navigation radios. Now of course we don't have anything set up in the nav radios. All it's doing is just flying by what we've got set as our heading and our altitude. If we wanted to use the GPS input, we simply hit that button until it reads GPS. You can see that the VOR indicator also changes there as well. So what happens when we have GPS set is the VOR indicator actually uses the signal from the GPS and not the nav radios. So you can use this to navigate if you're flying by GPS as well. But I won't be doing that. I won't be using that sort of in this video. Now if we want the autopilot to bring us back onto this sort of flight path here, all we simply do is hit the nav button on the autopilot, and you see that it'll start to turn the plane back onto our kind of intended course or our flight plan there. So let's look at some of the information that we have around the screen here. So we'll start up in the top left. We've got WPT, which stands for waypoint. That just says where we're going. So EGPE, Inverness. BRG is bearing, so that tells us the bearing to the waypoint there. CTS stands for course to steer. So what this is giving us the sort of ideal angle or the ideal heading that we want to fly to bring us back onto our flight plan. So you can see that it's saying 299 at the moment, and the plane will slowly bring itself back onto that heading. ETA is our estimated time of arrival, so we should be getting back to the airport, or to that waypoint more specifically, at 13:12 local time, LC, local time there. VSR stands for vertical speed required. So if we want to get to that, I think what that means is if we want to get to the waypoint at 4,000 feet that we've got set in our autopilot there, we would need to descend at 10 feet per second. I don't particularly use that, and I'm not sure what the kind of real world application of that would be, so I don't really pay too much attention to that. TKE stands for track angle error. So basically that tells us how kind of far off our intended track that we are, like heading wise. At the moment we're about 24 degrees off our track. However, when we reach our kind of intended track again and the plane turns on, that will slowly decrease down to 0 degrees when we're kind of bang on course and we're flying the exact heading that we want. And then XTK down here stands for cross track error, which basically tells us how far off our intended sort of flight path we are. So you can see at the moment that the flight path is 0.2 nautical miles to the left. That relates to this bar at the bottom centre here, which works very similar to our kind of course deviation indicator. So if you imagine the needle on the VOR indicator here, it's a similar sort of picture that we have here at the bottom centre. And you can see that the plane is turned, our track angle error is reducing, and we're going to centre up nicely on that line. Other new data that we have here, we've got DTK, which is direct track, so that tells us a kind of the direct track to the waypoint. And then this up here is your distance, and then ETE down here is your estimated time en route. So it tells us that it's going to take us 4 minutes at our current speed to get to this waypoint. And also at the bottom centre here we have are kind of the details of what leg of the journey we're on. So if we had a waypoint beforehand, it would show up here, and it would show us a little symbol here, and then we're going to this waypoint here. This symbol just basically means that we're flying direct to this waypoint. And that's sort of all the new information that you have on the screen there. So let's say that, for example, that we want to fly to Inverness and fly an ILS approach. Before I do that though, sorry, let me go back and we'll have a look at the flight plan page. And you can see now that we have a few details about our flight plan. So we've got a little identifier code, a quick description of the flight plan, and we've got our various waypoints. So the waypoint, the direct track to that waypoint, the distance to that waypoint, and also the cumulative distance. So if we had several waypoints, the distance would be simply added up, and you can see the total kind of distance for our flight plan there. Okay, sorry, going back to flying an approach to Inverness. So what we would do is we would go into our procedures page here, and you can see that we've got 3 options here. 2 of them are kind of greened out, shall we say, at the moment, but we do have an option to select our approach. So I'll hit enter to go into that menu, and you can see the airport is Echo Golf Papa Echo. That's all fine. So we can see that we've got approach selected at the moment, and this is the list of approaches which are available for Inverness Airport. So we've got 2 VOR DMEs and 2 ILS approaches. The one that we want will be 05, and let's say that we want to fly the ILS. So we use the smaller dial to select that, and then we hit enter to select that approach. And now this trans option here, this is stands for transition, and this is basically how we get from our current position onto that approach. We have 4 options available. We have vectors, so you would use this if you were being guided by air traffic control. So if they were giving you specific headings and altitudes to fly, you would follow those, and those are basically vectors onto the approach. We're not flying with ATC at the moment, so we won't be using that. The next one, INS, will take us over the INS VOR, so that will take us directly over the airport, and it will give us a kind of a route to fly into the ILS approach. I will be using that one, but I'll show you the other 2 just now. RANOC relates to a waypoint that we can fly in, and also Delta 193 November, that's another waypoint as well. What I'll do is I'll show you RANOC. So if we hit that, you can see that it gives us a white line there. So basically, if any aircraft was approaching from the south, they would approach using the RANOC transition, and you can see that you approach what will be a waypoint down here. Hopefully you can just about see that triangle, and then you turn left out towards the top end of Loch Ness, and then join the sort of the localizer into runway 5 there. I'm not going to be using RANOC. I'm going to fly directly over Inverness there, and you'll see that we'll get a different approach. So move the cursor up to the transition, hit enter, or do we do that? No, we've got that wrong. So jump to approach again. So enter ILS runway 5, and then we want INS. So you can see that it's given us a different flight plan. So what I'll do is I'll hit enter and load that, and you can see that it gives us a list of waypoints now. I need to be quick because I think we're getting very close to the airport. Yep. So you can see that it gives us a different approach now. You can see it gives us kind of this white line here. So the approach that we'll fly will be out in this direction, and then we'll kind of loop around and fly back into the runway. This extra bit here is our missed approach. So if we miss the approach for any reason, it'll take us along this path here. I'll explain that later on. Now, if we go back into procedures, we have two options. The other two options are available now. So I want to activate that approach, so I'll hit enter on that, and then it simply activates that approach. So it takes us directly into the VOR, and then once we reach the VOR, it will change and take us onto our kind of outbound leg away from Inverness there. So it's a bit messy, that there, but you can see this pink line now is lit up, and you can see that it's going to take us away from Inverness. For example, if we have a look at the sort of the ILS-INS transition again, so you can see we've got the solid line here, which is the actual approach, with the arrows designating the kind of direction of flight, and then you can see the dotted line is our kind of missed approach. So what I'll do is, while we're flying away, I'll take a second to explain that. So the missed approach for Inverness, if we miss the runway for any reason, be it bad weather, high winds, or an obstruction on the runway, what we would do is we fly the runway heading, and then we kind of loop back towards the Inverness VOR, and then we simply enter a holding pattern above the airport until we decide what to do. So clear all that down. Okay, so now we're flying sort of outbound away from Inverness. So what you would do along this point of the journey is basically get yourself set up for the approach and get ready for the landing. So what I'm going to do is start slowing myself down. Just close down the GPS there and bring myself down to 2,100 feet. So what we're going to do is we're going to start to descend down to an altitude. We will, when we reach the glide slope there, we'll intercept it from below. Now, unfortunately, GPS navigation does not support the kind of the ILS approach, or it doesn't give you vertical guidance, shall I say. So what you'll need to do is you'll still need to set up your radios for an ILS approach, and then once you get ready to intercept the ILS approach, you would switch from GPS back onto your navigation radios, and then that will allow your autopilot to fly. Not only it will fly by locking onto the localizer, and also fly when locking onto the glide slope. I'll explain that a bit better when we get closer to the time. But what I'm going to do just now is just set up the radios for an ILS approach for Inverness runway 05. So we know that the ILS frequency is 108.5. Make that active. Now you see that the VOR indicator didn't move in any way. That's because it's still taking its input from the GPS. However, if you have a look at the DME, you can see that that has sort of come alive, and you can see that that seems to be working fine. We can also confirm that we're tuned into the ILS frequency by listening out on the Nav1 radio, so we'll do that now just to confirm that we are tuned in correctly. Which we are. Perfect. And of course the last step, as with any ILS approach, is to set the OBS to the runway heading. So for runway 05 at Inverness, the runway heading is 055. There we go. So that's our kind of ILS, well, that's our navigation radio setup for ILS. Now of course, while this switch is still showing GPS, the plane will continue to fly this GPS route. So it's going to take us a couple of minutes down to get down to this turn. So what I'll do is I'll cut the video here, and we'll rejoin just as we're making this turn at the end here. Okay, welcome back. So you can see now that we're just in the middle of our kind of turn. You can can see, judging by the flight path, what's going to happen is the GPS is going to turn us onto a heading where we're going to intercept the localizer from runway 05, and then you can see that the GPS is set to turn the plane onto the sort of the localizer there as well. I'm not going to let it do that. What I'm going to do is, once we're established on this this kind of heading, this intercept heading, what I'm going to do is switch the plane's kind of navigation systems from GPS back onto the navigation radios, and then let those take care of intercepting the first the localizer and then the glide slope, and then let the autopilot handle the approach into Inverness. So just let things get settled down here. You can see it's turning back to the right now, just to get ourselves settled. Okay, so we're there now. So what I'll do is hit this button on top of the radio stack here and switch it back onto nav. And you can see that our kind of VOR indicator sort of came alive there. And then what we can do now is also hit approach on the autopilot. And then what should happen now is the autopilot should just automatically lock onto the localizer first of all, and then the glide slope. And you can see now that we've switched back onto our nav radio, you can see that the glide slope needle and the glide slope flag are now active as well. If you have a look at GPS, you can see that the glide slope flag is disabled, whereas if we're using navigation radios, it's active. So that's what we want. Obviously, if we were using the autopilot to kind of fly the approach, then that's exactly what we want. And then from here on, it's just a basic ILS approach and landing. You can see the aircraft's now just trying to settle itself out. Because I switched back and forth between the two, I kind of confused it a little bit. But you can see Inverness Airport is out here, and we're still on a heading that will intercept the localizer. So everything is looking good there. You can see now it's beginning its gentle turn to pick that up, and if we have the GPS there, zoom right in, you can see that it's kind of shortcutting this tiny bit there, but it's not a big deal. So yeah, so hopefully you've seen an ILS approach from here on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to skip the video again, but this time I'm going to do it just before we touch down and show you what we would do in the event that we fly a missed approach. So I'll cut the video here and I'll catch you in 2 seconds. Okay, welcome back. So let's say that you need to execute a missed approach. For example, the visibility is so bad that even at this distance you still can't see the runway, or there could possibly be an obstruction on the runway, such as another plane, or it might be that the wind is so strong that you're losing, so you're struggling to get control of the plane, and you're not confident that you can safely put the plane on the ground. So what you would do is whack on full throttle and just get into a stable climb again. So your main priority, you probably heard this phrase already, is just fly the plane. So you're not concentrating on navigating or anything, you just want to keep the plane going in a straight line and make sure that it's climbing at a good speed and at a good sort of rate of climb there, or a good vertical speed as well. So once you're happy and stable, reduce the flaps. Speed is good, make sure you're still climbing on the vertical speed, and then just keep reducing the flaps until the plane is in a stable climb. And once you're happy that you're heading away from the ground safely. Now, if we wanted to sort of hook into the GPS again to get into that hold, what we need to do first of all is switch our radios back onto GPS. Now, during the approach, I've disabled the autopilot, so the plane is not flying itself. I'm still in control of the plane at the moment. If we have a look at the GPS here, you can see that the sort of the missed approach is already automatically activated. So you can see it says RW05, runway 05, and then 2000. So if we have a look at the flight plan, you can see it shows 2,000 feet there. So that's the altitude that we need to climb up to for our missed approach. So what I'm going to do is dial that into the autopilot and enable that. And now that we've got GPS selected again, if we hit the nav switch, that will tell the plane to navigate onto that ID sort of flight path there. And then there's not really much that's going to happen. All the plane is simply going to do is just follow this line around back in towards the Inverness VOR, and then once it reaches the VOR again, it will automatically jump onto this holding pattern, and I can show you that just now if I do that. And if we scroll down here, you can see, so this the pink arrow shows us our current sort of leg, runway 05 up to 2,000 feet, and then once we reach 2,000 feet, it will take us back into the Inverness VOR, and you can see that the next kind of point there is our hold. You can see it gives us our total distance, so we'll fly 17 nautical miles to get to the hold. And that is pretty much how you do navigating and approaches with the GPS. One more thing I'll show you quickly is how you can fly a full flight plan using the GPS as well. So to set up a flight plan, the first step is to click the flight planner button here on the free flight screen. That will bring up this window where you can plan the flight. So I've chosen to depart from Inverness, and I've also selected a gate number there as well. The second step is to choose my destination, which is Belfast. The third step is to decide whether you want to fly VFR or IFR, and that will be dependent on what weather you're expecting. Step 4 is to choose how you want to fly there, so you can fly direct or in a straight line, fly using low altitude airways, high altitude airways, or fly by VOR navigation. Then the final step is to click the Find Route button, and it will automatically plan the route for you and show you on the screen like this. So here you can see the route marked with the red line, and on the right you can see each waypoint listed in order. When you click the OK button at the bottom, you'll get a pop-up asking if you want to move your plane to the position listed at the departure airport. So accept this and then start the flight. Okay, so here we are back in the plane, and you can see that the simulator has moved us to the gate in front of the terminal building here at Inverness. So if we open up the GPS, we can see that all of the information is already sort of populated on our main navigation screen, and you can see that we've already got a pink line showing our flight path. And you can see the next waypoint is PTH, which is Perth, the distance 17 nautical miles. If we have a look at the flight plan, we can see that we've got all of our various waypoints along the flight plan there, and you can see that the description of the flight plan: Echo Golf Papa Echo to Echo Golf Alpha Charlie. So if we wanted to fly that, all you would simply do is take off, get yourself sort of in a stable climb, and then switch the nav GPS button onto GPS, enable the nav button on the autopilot, and away you go, and the plane will fly that route completely automatically, nice and easy for you, the pilot. So there's my attempt at explaining the GPS in FSX. That ended up being much longer than I thought it would, but I think that I covered most aspects of flying with the GPS. Anyway, for my next video, I don't know what I'm going to do yet. I'd planned my sort of video series up to this video, and I haven't quite thought of where to take it next, but rest assured I will definitely have a video up next weekend. Anyway, thank you very much for watching if you've made it this far. Take care, and I'll catch you later.